a number of folks who are watching through the the city's Facebook stream. So we're glad to have you all here, welcome you here. Tonight's event is titled Emerging from Hurricane Ian, Stronger and More Resilient, Lessons in Emergency Response. My name is Bob Moore. I serve as the co-chair of the Sanibel and Captiva Renewable Energy Working Group, and I've also been helping in the formation of the new community coalition known as the SanCap Citizens for a Resilient Future. And that's the group that is hosting tonight's event.
And I'm Carrie Schumann. I'm the Coastal Resilience Manager for the Sanibel and Captiva Conservation Foundation. We're one of the partner organizations in the SanCap Citizens Group. My position's also a partnership with the Captiva Erosion Prevention District, who are also a partner in the group. Bob and I have been working together with many of our community organizations and concerned citizens to get this new collaboration off the ground. This is our third community event since the group's formation in February of this year, and we're really gratified by the extent of community engagement that we've really been seeing so far. As of today, our coalition consists of 14 community nonprofits or governmental groups, and you can see them listed on the slide right here. We've had hundreds of you sign up to express your interest in being involved, and really this is just the beginning. Our goal is to involve all stakeholders who are interested in working together to help our communities rebuild from Ian and to improve resilience into our future.
And we thank you all for hanging in there with us without any air conditioning tonight. So if you want to be fanning yourself as the night goes on. As a setup to this evening's program, we want to take a few minutes to answer questions that we've been hearing from a number of you regarding this new group. What is it? What are its goals? Is it redundant to work that other groups in the community and in the county are already doing? And also, how can I get involved? So we also want to describe the goals of this evening's program and talk a little bit about an online interaction tool that we'll use toward the end of the evening to have you ready to go with that tool.
But first, I want to say how incredibly grateful we are to the emergency response professionals who will be joining us shortly to share their knowledge and their insights. Our panelists tonight include emergency management leadership from Lee County, along with local and Sanibel Captiva leaders from fire, law enforcement, public works, and human services.
And our city manager, Dana Souza, who ran an incredible operation helping to link the efforts of these emergency responders and others, will be this evening's panel moderator.
So we have a really great program in store for all of you. I also want to express thanks to John Henshaw. He led our first two community events and was the initial inspiration behind the creation of this Resilience Coalition. He couldn't be here tonight, but this effort all started with a simple question he asked of some of the leaders of local nonprofits. And that question was, should we create a citizen-led response to help rebuild more resiliently and make plans to be better prepared for the future? And the yes response to that question has been unanimous and has been the foundation of this new effort.
So back just briefly to the questions of who we are, what our goals are, and where do we go from here. I think probably the most honest response is that we're still trying to figure all that out. This is a new coalition group that is forming, and the topic of resilience is so broad that it really covers a lot of territory. It's a big topic to tackle. Having said that, there has been some time for us to start to really narrow our goals and our focus. And there are two basic ones that we're focused on as a coalition. The first is to provide near-term support, information and resources to residents and business owners about how to rebuild more resiliently from the storm. And then the second is to lead a community-based effort to plan for our future resilience. And that really includes ways to adapt to changing conditions, things like hardened and flood-resistant buildings, native landscapes, resilient coastlines, evaluating infrastructure like water and wastewater systems, energy, transportation, communications. It also includes ways to mitigate the future impacts we might expect, by adopting efficiency measures to reduce energy consumption, transitioning to solar and other forms of renewable energy, and changing from gas to electric-powered vehicles.
So really, we do believe that Sanibel and Captiva can become a model for what it means to be resilient as a coastal community. We know that we've done this for sustainability, just as we've been, models also for how to balance our built environment with our natural environment. And for now, our focus has been these near-term goals. So listening to what the community is saying it needs as it rebuilds from Hurricane Ian, and then developing program and support to address those needs. For those of you who are here for our first program in March, you'll remember that we used an online tool called Menti, and we used that to ask for your feedback on how you were impacted by the storm and what you felt would be the most useful ways to support your recovery. And that feedback, we've used that feedback to largely, and you can see here's an example of what that's looked like. So that feedback has largely guided the decisions we've made about the subsequent community events that we've planned. And for example, when we asked what topics would be helpful for us to focus on, your responses, the top responses we're building, you can see here, we're building for hurricane and flood protection, and then you can see also issues related to our natural areas and landscapes. And so as a result, we took those two top focuses and made them really the priority for our second community event.
Yeah, and you may remember that we also asked some open-ended questions so we could understand individually what concerns and impacts were. And your responses covered a lot of areas. Not surprisingly, one of the primary themes that came through related to the emotional toll of what we've all been through. PTSD, lack of ways to connect with community, friends moving away, stress, etc. As recently as this past March, when we gathered this feedback from you all, over 40% of you were not back in your homes yet, and that's difficult to deal with. So the message came through that the human side of resiliency, finding ways to support each other, to come together as a community, is a critical part of our rebuilding needs, and that will be a part of some of our future programming.
Other strong themes that we saw did relate to preserving what is special about our community. So there is a lot of concern expressed about being able to essentially hang on to the conservation ethic that is really core to our sanctuary islands. Will these changes lead to overdevelopment? Can we stay true to the Sanibel plan, to the Captiva plan? And the ways that they really prioritize that conservation ethic and balance between natural and built systems. Will we lose the charm and small town feel as residents move out and homes are purchased just to be rented out? On a similar note, there was a lot of concern about the diversity of our community. So will people be able to afford to build back? Or will the islands turn into a place where only vacationers can afford to come? How can we keep the richness of our community and make sure people who work here can live here? Will we see a lot of new people move in who don't value our island's unique cultural and sanctuary quality of life? And will we subsequently lose what's special about this place? So those were really the kinds of questions that we were seeing people grapple with and pose.
Yeah, many other points were raised, like the hassles people are having with insurance, the challenges of dealing with FEMA and SBA, concerns about the health of our economy and our local businesses, our local government's ability to be fiscally sound, and more. So all of these issues underscore the importance of the point in time we find ourselves in. We, the citizens and the business owners of Sanibel and Captiva, have choices to make that will determine the future of our community for years to come. In our first event, Porter Goss, who was the keynote speaker, likened this moment to the establishment of Sanibel back in the 70s. And at that time, citizens came together and really chose the future that they wanted to create. And although it's different now in many ways, we are in a similar situation today. We're facing overdevelopment issues in the county around us, water quality issues, the impacts of climate change. These are defining issues for us as we decide the future that we want.
And so one thing we recognize is really creating that future will take a lot of community involvement and help from local and outside experts with knowledge and experience to help us navigate those challenges ahead. So one of the opportunities that our group has recently announced to promote community involvement is the formation of topic-specific working groups. And the goal of these groups is to do a deeper dive into some key areas of resilience in order to share with the community best practices, resources, and other kinds of support. So there are 3 working groups that we are currently recruiting for if you're interested and would like to get involved. And so those 3 groups, the first is focused on resilient building best practices. The second is focused on natural environment and landscaping best practices. The third is our communications group, which is focused on essentially the best ways to disseminate that information, how to really keep the community engaged with those issues and to keep these conversations going. And while we welcome people with specific skills in these areas, you don't have to be an expert. We really just want people who are engaged and want to be part of what we're doing. So you can sign up for either group by filling in a form. There's going to be a form on the tables outside. So we have forms that are specifically for signing up for our email list if you're interested, but then there's those that are specific to the working group. So those will be outside. So if you are interested and you haven't gotten a chance yet, afterwards, certainly go find those. We would be so excited to have your interest. And also, if you're watching online, you can scan that QR code. That QR code will essentially take you to a Google form that has the same information. You can sign up there as well. You can also sign up just to be on that email list that I was describing if you haven't already. So you can see here, so there's that list out in the lobby. And then, so we're doing a lot of QR codes just to make life a little easier. So you could scan this QR code, and this is a place where you could sign up to receive regular updates, so announcements about these kinds of events and some of the other things that we have currently sort of brewing and going on.
Yeah, and this is not the end of the invitation for community involvement. We expect that we'll establish additional working groups as we look at issues like going deeper into social support, business prosperity. The Chamber of Commerce is one of the partner groups in our coalition, energy resilience, strategic planning, and more. One of the other roles we see for this resilience coalition is to recruit experts to complement and guide that citizen involvement. So some of those are that actually already exist in the groups that are part of this coalition. In fact, one of the things that we're clear about is that it's important that we don't want to reinvent the wheel and replicate any work that any of the local member groups or others in the community are already doing. On the contrary, our goal is to amplify the work of our member organizations as it relates to resilience, while also identifying places where there are gaps, where we can be more effective as a community and as a coalition. So this is really a citizen-led effort, which is distinct from other government-led initiatives. And we believe that this group can be a good complement to the efforts of government entities in Sanibel and Captiva and also in Lee County, including the Lee County Recovery Task Force.
So also for me in my role as somebody whose job is really focused on resilience in the community, I believe that having citizen engagement and leadership is really crucial for this work. It's important that everybody's voice is heard. It's also important to help bring the resources we'll need to our community. So one aspect of that is that many funding organizations, they're often looking for community engagement and input as a really important criteria when deciding who to give resiliency funds to. So this group creates a really obvious mechanism for fostering that engagement and collecting that input. And that's just one of the ways that we can help support planning efforts further down the road.
So that really begins to address some of the questions about who this group is, what our goals are, and where we go from here. We wanted to provide a little bit of more of this context at the beginning of the program. For those of you here for the first program, our panel was so engaging that we ended up with about 5 minutes at the end to try to squeeze some of this content in. So we put it at the beginning tonight to make sure we had time. We'll continue to evolve, and as we do, we'll continue to do our best to communicate out to the community around any of those changes. But at this point, let's turn our attention now to tonight's panel.
So we're probably, we're acutely aware that we are headed into another hurricane season. It's just around the corner. And we certainly recognize for a lot of folks that may be very unnerving, considering we're still putting our lives together, back together from the last season. So really one of the things we're going to do tonight is we're going to ask, what are the lessons that we can take out of this unprecedented event of Ian that can help us deal with future events? And what did we do right, and what can we do better?
All right, so that is the focus of tonight's panel, and we have an incredibly talented group of experts to take us through those insights. In a moment, we're going to turn it over to our city manager, Dana Souza, to lead us into the program, but we do have one last order of business to take care of before we move on.
So essentially, we're going to get you comfortable with Menti, because as we've said several times tonight, that it's really important to have everybody's voices heard. It's really important, and I can't really say how much we value having that input. It's really been able to guide us as we've moved through this process. So we're going to use this tool again, and I just want to make sure everybody's comfortable with it. So if you've been to a couple of our other events, you've already hopped onto this before. But essentially, you can see the instructions above me. And so if you're comfortable with scanning QR codes, I would go ahead and scan the QR code. Some of you may have already gotten to do this out in the lobby, but you can scan the QR code. It will take you directly to where the survey will be. You'll probably see an opening slide saying something like instructions. You can just kind of sit at that page until we're ready. We're going to do some of this at the end, but we just like to get you oriented and ready for later on in the event. If you're not so comfortable with using QR codes, what you can do is you can go to the website. You're just going to open up a browser. You're going to type in www.menti.com. And you're going to enter this code. I'm just going to read it out for folks in case you're having a little trouble visually seeing it. So it's 57439540. So I'm just going to read that out once more. So it's 57439540. And we will take time at the end to make sure we get you reoriented if you're having any trouble with it. But again, we're just so happy to have you here, and I think I'm going to...
Yeah, so we'll be back briefly at the end, but it's now my pleasure to introduce Dana Souza, City Manager for the City of Sanibel. Okay. Dana?
Thank you. Hi there. Thank you, Bob and Carrie, and welcome to Inside the Actors Studio. You just all dated yourself. I've always wanted to say that. I've always wanted to be John Lipton just for one episode. I want to thank Bob and Carrie and the SanCap Citizens for a Resilient Future for organizing the 3 workshops that they've talked about to date. It really is no small effort. And I thank them for their work to deliver these much-needed and meaningful community discussions. I'm going to set my timer because we are on a time schedule, and we have, I'm told, 70 minutes. I just heard a sigh from the audience. They're going to be here for 70 minutes. Well, it only goes to, there we go. If I had my 12-year-old here, I could figure out how to work this real easily. Okay, we are underway. I also want to thank John Henshaw for being one of the catalysts and thought leaders who conceptualized these events, and he served as moderator for the first 2. I want to thank him, one, because this group is just really beneficial and meaningful. They're doing great work. And secondly, because it meant that I didn't have to do it. Unfortunately, John is out of town today, so I'm Plan B. And I want to thank Bob for crediting me during his comments with running part of the response and recovery efforts. But I'm one person who's working in a network of others who are committed to Sanibel's recovery. And emergency management is a team sport. And the people who will join me on the stage tonight and their colleagues are the people who ran the recovery. They and their team members deserve all the credit. So I should have been on that slide, so we'll skip to the next one and let our experiences inform us. So let's think about this town hall series just for a minute. Emerging from Hurricane Ian, stronger and more resilient. No two storms, no two emergencies are the same. There are many variables that can influence the level of damage we experience from a hurricane, which in turn influences the response that federal, state, and local governments, nonprofit organizations like FISH, Red Cross, faith-based organizations, and so on, and how we respond. So when we think about learning from our lessons, when I was a child, I'd like to go in the basements of my parents' home, which was constructed in 1853 with a full basement, and I liked playing with the fuses. Those of you who dated themselves with inside the actor studio, those are the fuses that would screw in, not the circuit breakers. And I would like to play with those because every now and then I'd hear a crackle, and I would certainly hear my father curse every time the lights went out. And to a young child, that was pretty interesting until it happened. And I got a shock, and I ended up on the concrete floor. I remember that lesson that is 50-plus years old. It certainly has influenced my decisions and my planning when I'm around electricity. And just like all of the experiences that we've had that shape us in our lives, emergency management is the same way. What happened to us yesterday influences how we will plan and how we will respond tomorrow. So disaster management cycle, it is very important and it's very cyclical. We always hope that we're cycling through just two of these items, two of these elements, mitigation and preparedness. And we hope that we will never have to experience the response preparedness, that little sliver that is up at the top of the circle, the disaster itself, and then the response and recovery elements of this cycle. But from a planning perspective, all the elements that are shown in the graphic are visited every year. And today we're focusing on response. And response activities from emergency management is defined as activities that address the short-term direct effects of an incident. And an incident can be a hurricane, it can be a tornado, it can be a wildfire, it can be a mass shooting, it can be many things that we have to respond to from an emergency perspective. And the response includes immediate actions to save lives, to protect property, and to meet basic human needs. Response also includes the execution of an emergency operations plan. All government organizations have emergency operations plan. We look at them every year. We update them as needed. Lots of nonprofit and businesses also have emergency operations plans. And the specific actions include, depending on the type of incident, it could be a lockdown. It could be an evacuation, such as for a hurricane. It could be search and rescue operations like we experienced after Ian. It could be fire suppression. But because there is a critical symbiotic relationship between preparedness and response, we're also going to discuss tonight some important elements of preparedness with the panel. And so let's zoom to Hurricane Ian and the development of this storm. On September 22nd, 2022, Invest 98L was in the Caribbean Sea. That means it's just a disturbance. It's a blip on the map. September 23rd, it formed as Tropical Depression number 9. On September 24th, it became Tropical Storm Ian, 300 miles south of Jamaica. On the 26th, it became a hurricane, and on the 28th, it made landfall. That's a short period of time for that storm to accelerate. And the slide shows the track that it took, which brings it right to our shores. And so the city of Sanibel began its first news release, or released its first new release on Invest 98L on Thursday, September 22nd at 4 p.m. in the afternoon. So why did we do that? It's just a blip. You can see it circled on that map. And that is the news release that we sent out with that image. We were concerned, based on the early modeling of the storm, that this one could develop. And we were going into the weekend. And sometimes we don't pay close attention to the news, the weather report on the weekends, because there's other fun things to do. So we wanted to begin the messaging before the weekend started. And we issued news releases every day after that as the storm moved into the Gulf and intensified. Communication is vital during all elements of disaster management, and I think the city did an excellent job before, during, and after the event. And managing crisis, right? There's no perfect science to it, but it is about communication to make sure that all of you know what's going on to the best extent possible. And as I said, preparedness and response are tied together. The better we prepare, the better our response, regardless of the ferocity of the storm. So I want to revisit the track of the storm in a different way just before our panelists come out. And I'm going to move through the next few slides quickly. And these illustrate how Hurricane Ian and the National Weather Service messaging evolved between September 22nd and September 28th. If I go back to this image, that's September 22nd, just a blip on the screen. And then when we move to the 23rd, it's a tropical storm. And you can see at the top of the screen, 8 a.m. on Wednesday, it was predicted to be a major hurricane right here at Sanibel. This had our attention. As we moved on to Sunday, September 25th, the storm's moving to the north. It's moving to further to the west, away from Sanibel. Folks start to get a sigh of relief. We start to get a little comfort built in that this is going to miss us. Then it starts to shift back later in the day, 5 p.m. It's turning back on the 26th, and then on the 26th later in the day, it continues that turn. 26th in the morning, 26th in the afternoon. I take these screenshots every release, so this isn't something that I have to go back and create. It's information that I send council as we get updated information, and you can see how that storm is tracking on this date, September 26th. Monday, we were shown to be right on the edge of that hurricane. The day before, we were still in a tropical storm warning, but then we're right in the hurricane zone. And there's a big shift. See how that storm track shifted? One thing that's important, and our panelists will speak to it, is look how wide the cone is, and that's what you have to pay attention to. And here we are at September 28th at 5 a.m., and the storm is at our door. And that's to illustrate how quickly these things change and accelerate. The storm grew in strength, predicted to be a major storm, and its forward speed was incredible as it marched into the Gulf. I'd like to call out our panelists so we can begin the discussion. First is Benjamin Abis. He is the Public Safety Director with Lee County. Kevin Barbeau, the Fire Chief of Sanibel Fire and Rescue District. William Dalton, Police Chief, City of Sanibel. Maria Espinoza, Executive Director, Fish of SanCap. Scott Krozek, now Interim Director of Public Works for the City of Sanibel. And Mike Sawicki, Lieutenant with the Lee County Deputy Sheriff. As I said, these are the folks that manage it on the ground. These are the folks who were here from day one on the islands. So this is meant to be a free-flowing conversation, not a question and answer, and I'll do my best to try to maintain it that way. And we're going to start out starting with Ben and then working our way to his left, your right, to give a very brief introduction of themselves and what they do, and then also to describe briefly, as they were responding to the storm and they heard that the causeway was out, how did that change your plans? Ben?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. My name is Ben Abus. I'm the Director of Public Safety for Lee County Government. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for the invitation and the opportunity to join you all here tonight. I've been with the county for 19 years, started here in 2004 as a paramedic, and moved here in March. So I was here for Charlie, and of course I've been here through Irma, as well as Hurricane Ian and all of the storms in between, Wilma and many others that have gone by our coast. I work primarily in the Emergency Operations Center, which is located on Ortiz Avenue in Fort Myers. That's my storm role that I occupy when an event is occurring. And so my role there is to work with our leaders at the county level, as well as our municipal partners, communicate with our liaisons with the city of Sanibel, as well as a number of other partners that are there in the room. And we've got a slide here in a little bit that talks about the EOC. But that's kind of my role when it comes to the hurricane response.
Chief?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you to Bob Moore, this resiliency group. It's a lot of work getting everybody here, getting these events together. My name is Kevin Barbeau. I'm the Sanibel Fire and Rescue District Fire Chief. I've been the fire chief for been the fire chief since October 10th of last year. So about 8 months, the same amount as the storm. However, I've got 19 years as well as a first responder. I've gone through the ranks. I've held every position. I've worked for 3 different agencies, and I've been here on Sanibel for 13 years now. I have the great honor to serve the best group of firefighters and paramedics in Lee County. We have a great recruiting effort where we get individuals with a lot of experience, 5-10 years of experience at other districts, Lee County MS sometimes, and we just get the best of the best, so we're really blessed. Sanibel Fire, it's important to note here tonight that it is an independent special district that was established in 1955 here on the island. Our governing board is comprised of a chair, Jerry Mensch, local residents for a very long time. We have a vice chair who is Bruce Cochran, and the secretary is Richard McCurry. Richard McCurry, raise your hand. You're in attendance tonight. Thank you for being here. It's important to note that we are separate government entities. However, we work hand in hand every single day. Communication has never been better between both agencies. We will continue to do so. We have the same common goal, and our goal is to serve our island and our residents first. We will continue to work in unison and make sure we do that well.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bill Dalton. I'm the police chief here on Sanibel. I've been the chief for about 6.5 years, and last Tuesday I started my 30th year with the department. So similar to what Ben said, I've been here through Hurricane Charlie and Wilma, and then Irma and Ian, and I would say Ian was worse than all the other ones combined. So I appreciate you having us here tonight, and like I said, I'd like to thank Bob as well. I think it's a lot of work to put these panels together, but I think it's very important to have a kind of an interactive discussion with the community so that you can have a better understanding what we did, before, during, and after the storm, and then we can have a better understanding of how to serve the community as well. So thanks again. I'm looking forward to this tonight.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maria Espinoza. I'm the Executive Director of Fish of Sanibel and Captiva. I've been with the organization since after Hurricane Irma, which was a very different storm, and we mainly serve the community based on human services. And that kind of changes depending on what the needs are, and post-storm, it was very much about relief and recovery efforts. When we noticed that the bridge was down, we knew our scope of work would not be able to provide the community the resources that they needed. So we worked closely with EOC, the Florida Division of Emergency Management, and National Hurricane Relief efforts to try to make sure that whatever the island needed was provided to them. That ranged from ice, water, hot meals, comfort stations, internet, just meeting the immediate human needs.
Hello, my name is Scott Krosick. I am the interim Public Works Director for the city. Now, I've been with the city now for over 22 years. I've been involved with hurricane recovery efforts for Charlie, Wilma, Irma, and now Ian. I've also been involved in operations for red drift algae and fish kill events. So, when the city manager, asked about, what we were thinking once we found out the bridge was out, well, Public Works had predetermined staging sites of the toll plaza, then Tanger outlets. So after, multiple dropped calls with Dana, we finally determined Public Works was going to, regather at the Bell Tower. So we got a small workforce of Public Works, me, the street superintendent, 2 equipment operators and a trades worker, and we were, shuttled out to the island that next afternoon, and we were there to push debris for emergency responders.
I'm Lieutenant Mike Sawicki with the Lee County Sheriff's Office. I am the supervisor for the barrier islands. So our zones include everything from about the Sanibel Lighthouse all the way to the Boca Grande Pass. Before the storm, we were in a pre-deployment shelter, and once we determined that the causeway was out, we responded back by boat. That's part of our normal response plan, because we figure there's probably going to be some sort of obstruction after a major storm, whether it's the causeway or just something in Sanibel. So return by boat is a key element of our response plan, but also because several of our communities are not accessible by road, including North Captiva and the private residences on Cayo Costa, Usepa, Cabbage Key.
Great. Thank you, Lieutenant. So I said that emergency management's a team sport, and since the chief broke the golden rule, you introduced some elected officials, you got to introduce them all. We have Mayor Richard Johnson is here, Vice Mayor Mike Miller is here, Councilwoman Holly Smith, there she is, Councilmember Scott Crater is here. It is a team sport, and they provided exceptional leadership to all of us who work for the city during this event. And I want to switch to a national preparedness goal. So this is what we base, all the tools that we use to generate our emergency operations plan. And simply this states a secure and resilient nation with capabilities required across the whole community to prevent, protect against, mitigate, respond to, and recover from the threats and hazards that pose the greatest risk across all forms of emergencies. So we're going to focus on the whole community. On the top of the slide, lots of words, but what it states is prepare the whole community. Preparedness is a shared responsibility. It calls for the involvement of everyone. So I want to turn to Chief Dalton and Maria and ask them to begin the conversation about the partner organizations that we have here on Sanibel. So when there's a hurricane that's approaching, there's a meeting that takes place with a partner organization. So Chief, Maria, either one of you.
So every year, as part of our preparation efforts, we have what's called a partners meeting. It's usually in Mackenzie Hall, and we invite and notify all those different entities that would help us put the community back together. We've been doing it ever since Hurricane Charlie. And in 2022, we had our partners meeting in June. I think it was in the middle of June. We invite LCEC, we invite the phone company, the school district, Lieutenant Sawicki comes, the fire department comes, Marie and her staff come. So we have a good network of communication established, and we always end the partners meeting by saying, let's hope this is the last time we get together this year. Well, 2022 wasn't that way. So, but it's good to have that network of partners together and in communication, because then when we need to reach out, and a lot of times the PD needs some help in these situations as well. We have everybody's contact number, and they have all of our information, and it just makes communication and working together much more seamless. So, Maria?
Yes, absolutely. Like most things, preparedness is a community effort, but especially when you have these types of storms. Our work begins right around May, and we are trying to identify vulnerable individuals, make sure that we keep a list for the city to just identify those who may not want to leave, but have to leave, and get everything really coordinated through our hurricane packets, through our volunteer force, to ensure that when a storm does come and we do inevitably have to meet with our partners again, we're ready to go. And the city and PD does a great job of connecting us all beforehand and making sure that we all know what each of our responsibilities are, so that when we serve the community, we're able to do so as seamlessly as possible.
Great, and I know that Ben, over in the county, things are similar, but they're different. There's lots of work about getting equipment ready and different organizations ready, but you have charge of getting schools and shelters ready and other work as well, right?
Certainly. So, we saw the slides earlier of the storm progression and the track. We started engaging with the school district Friday as the storm was first named, and then throughout the weekend. And one of our big partners when it comes to sheltering is the school district, because the vast majority of our shelters are located in public schools. We also have Hertz Arena, we have Alico Arena at FGCU, but the vast majority are in public schools. So we work with the local school district to pre-stage equipment, to get everything exactly where it needs to be, so that when the decision is made, we can immediately activate those plans and get those schools opened as public shelters. I think another thing that I would mention, Dana, on the bullets all the way at the bottom is the state, local, tribal, and territorial and federal partners. And this is something that I think the EOC also plays a big role in, is making sure that there's connections from the local municipalities through the county to the state to the federal partners, and making sure that all of those are intact. Without all of those partnerships and everybody working together in this whole community concept, that is stressed from preparedness through response, through mitigation, and recovery, that all of this would not be possible.
And then, Lieutenant, going to Captiva for a minute, Chief Dalton said you participate in that partner meeting, but what else do you do on Captiva to get prepared?
Well, really, the key for our success is a strong community partnership between public safety and our residents and the businesses and things like that. And that's a foundation that we lay well in advance of any kind of a storm, and that really is through public education and also communicating to our residents what our expectations are of them, and also what they can expect from us in return, what we're going to be doing in the wake of a storm. And I think that builds a lot of confidence for the community in knowing that their property is going to be safe in their absence.
Great, thank you. So we have partners that are ready, and we're all working around emergency operations plan, and that's a document that describes how people and property will be protected in disaster and disaster threat situations. As I mentioned earlier, we all have them, all organizations, government organizations have them, and they really are sort of the foundation of how we will respond to different events. But with each event, there are response challenges, as I said, that are different from one another. No storm is alike. So to follow up a little bit on the opening comments, the emergency operations plan is in place, but for the most part, all of us, all of you, expect that when the wind calms down, that we're going to be able to get into our cars and we'll be able to drive over that causeway and see what happened and begin our cleanup. Chief Barbeau, I'll ask you to start on this question to briefly describe how your emergency operation plans addresses response, but then you have to pivot. And how do you pivot when the road isn't there? We're all in the same situation on the other side of the shore.
Yeah, so this entire response and recovery has been nothing but a big pivot. I don't think anybody can plan for the magnitude and the force that came at us on the island. So I'm going to take a couple seconds to make sure that our audience understands how first responders kind of work throughout the county. And the way that works is in the county, we discontinue all emergencies after 40 miles an hour. So we have to make a risk versus benefit analysis of what is the cost of staying on island, possibly jeopardizing our safety, and also possibly damage to our equipment. So we decided to leave at 11 p.m. on Tuesday night. We evacuated with the mandatory evacuation, and we retreated with our equipment back to Gateway, to higher grounds, and to a safe zone. The strength and the size and the magnitude and the force of the storm surge that was coming to our island was enough for us to make that decision. And that decision is never taken lightly. We're leaving our second home. Our firefighters consider the island home. And leaving is an eerie feeling, and it's not a good feeling for not only everybody here in the audience that left their homes, but also our firefighters. It's not a welcome sight. During the storm, what our crew does is they monitor the radio. We are listening to all the radio communications. We're making a list. We had a total of 75 dispatches during the storms when we were off island for over 24 hours. When we come back to the island, we'll prioritize those calls. We'll come back and we'll respond to those emergencies. In addition to these 911 emergencies being called out, we also have chief officers of the district that were getting personal phone calls to their cell phones. Some of them were crying. Some of them were asking to take care of their loved ones. They had an inability to communicate with their loved ones. I can't tell you to tell you what that feels like and what your stomach goes through when individuals are calling you and they think their family members are not alive and they're struggling. We have all, as first responders, gone through these many emotions of caring and compassion and again, I'm going to say it again, we may not live here, we may not reside here as first responders, but this is our home. We're here every third day. For here, I'm here almost every single day, so we love this place just as much as you do. So on Wednesday evening, the storm is still not calmed down, and I made a not so good decision to leave my house and try to make it back to the island. There were no reports of the causeway and what we were going to find once I left. For about 3 hours, I tried to make it back. I didn't make it as far as A&W Bulb. I couldn't make it down Summerlin. I couldn't make it anywhere. The storm surge was still too high, and my truck was going to stall. It was unsafe for me to do so. There were stalled out vehicles everywhere. Couldn't make it back, once again, feeling helpless. That's not what us first responders are taught. We usually go into problems, not run away, and I had to go back home. At 5 a.m. that next morning, we showed up at the causeway. It was myself and Captain Jackson, and we met Attorney John Agnew at the causeway, and we made it about half a mile past Port Comfort Marina on Summerlin, and I want you guys to throw a deck of cards on the table and envision the asphalt just on top of each other. And that's what we came to. So we couldn't make it any further, so we went on foot for about a mile and a half. We got to the causeway, and we noticed a 40-foot section of the bridge was missing. I believe about 30 minutes to an hour before that is when the reports broke out. We actually had a reporter there with us as well, and that's when the initial reports came out that the causeway had been taken out. So the issue with that is it really, first off, you're speechless. You're sitting there staring at this missing section of bridge and trying to figure out, okay, what's next? Emergency plans are great. Binders are great. What happens when we don't have a road? Therein lies the beginning. So we regrouped. We worked on priorities. Where can we launch a boat from? Well, the causeway boat ramp by Ponderosa was not looking too hot. That was not an option. We were looking upriver, also couldn't find ways to get in, so we went to Port Comfort Marina. We took out trees and made the boat ramp accessible. Little did we know that in less than 24 hours, Port Comfort Marina would be named kind of the home for all rescue and evacuation efforts for the entire county for both Captiva and Sanibel. Once we got there, we tried to get boats going. Another issue, right? Every boat had washed on shore. They were stuck in mangroves. Every boat was on top of each other. Luckily for us, Adventures in Paradise's catamaran, somehow, miraculously, who knows, we're right there, ready to go with fuel and the engines running. Those were a godsend. They got us through the initial 2 to 3 weeks, and without them, we wouldn't have been able to evacuate about 1,000 people. When we finally got to the island, we arrived with Sanibel PD at the same time, and I've just got another minute, Dana, and I'll finish up. We arrived on the island at the causeway with Sanibel PD. We found bikes in the mangroves, and Billy Kirkland's everywhere on this island. I don't know if he's here tonight, but yeah, he's everywhere, even when he's not physically with you. So we found these bikes in the mangrove, and we used them to get back to our station. That bike ride is normally about a 10-minute ride. I think it took us about 45 minutes. Those chains definitely needed some grease after the storm surge. Maybe we'll get Billy to work on that. Due to accessibility issues and the trees blocking the roadway, specifically periwinkle. Periwinkle is our main artery. If we don't have periwinkle, we can't move people, we can't move first responders, we can't move vehicles, and we knew that was a priority, and we needed to clear that up. Now, we didn't have a bridge, so where's Public Works? Well, they're trying to figure out how to get over as well. I called Scott and Officer Kyle Eckert, and we got the code for a front end loader, and Sanibel Fire went ahead and cleared periwinkle. And no, I had never driven a front end loader before, but it worked out. So that morning we had a path, and thank God that Scott and his crews showed up that afternoon to help us, because without their valuable contribution to this, and I think they're kind of the unsung heroes, and they need a lot more recognition than they get. If we don't have access to streets, if we don't have access to areas to do search and rescue efforts, we can't do our jobs. And I think that's really important. And I'll finish up. Lots of decisions and actions were made with outside-the-box thinking those initial 96 hours of this response. We were proactive throughout the entire process and not reactive.
And I'm going to stop you there, Chief, so we can, because I want to hear from the lieutenant, because similar but different, right? You have to get across the causeway. What were you thinking?
Sure. We also left from Port Sanibel, Port Comfort area. We had sent out the Captiva Fire Department and my deputies to look for a place that we could launch a boat. And once we found that spot, I'd already gone out to retrieve our boat from its safe storage. We returned back to Captiva, kind of cut our way to the fire station, and just kind of like you guys did, we figured out quickly, with the causeway being out, that anything we needed to use would have to be already on the island, at least for a while, until they could get equipment to us. So through our partnerships with Tween Waters Inn and South Seas Resort, we pretty much just hot-wired all their stuff and started using it. And just like you guys, we cleared roads. We did about 5 miles of road in 2 days. And that gave us a response corridor, just kind of like what the chief was saying there, for fires, other emergencies, to be able to push through with the search and rescue effort. And just, I couldn't really be any more proud of the work that the Captiva Fire Department and my deputies did. The amount of work they did was just, it was a Herculean effort, and there was no complaining. They just got in there and did it. Just couldn't be more happy with the way that worked out.
Great, thanks, Lieutenant. And so standard operating procedure as the storm is approaching is all assets, for the most part, are brought off the island. It's just a little few pieces of equipment that were left. We try to get them on higher ground, and we're going to speak to that in another slide. So I'm going to move on so we can talk about an emergency operations center, which is a physical or virtual location where leaders of a jurisdiction coordinate the response. And Ben, we're going to start with you. Tell us what that important function is that an EOC provides, and then please, if you would, also talk about what a state of emergency is and what it isn't.
Sure. So first of all, the EOC is a building. It's very nondescript. It has very few windows. You may drive right past it and not realize what it is. But as I tell everybody, the magic of the EOC is not the building itself, it's the work that goes on inside of it. And that's where we typically will collect anywhere from 150 to 300 responders, representatives, delegates, you name it, from all of our different partner agencies from across the county, but also a number of state and federal entities as well. And all of those parties get together there. We work before, in the event of a hurricane, it's before landfall, planning and strategizing, making decisions together, working through all of the challenges that occur before the impact, and then working throughout the period of impact, and then in the days, weeks, and months to come. The EOC is really where we collect and digest all the information that's coming in from the community, and then start to process the priorities and the plans and the things that we need to do to be able to empower whether it's the county resources or municipal resources, special district resources, all of those things to be able to accomplish and meet those needs. Now, state of emergency is I think in some ways a little misunderstood, because really a state of emergency is just a legal declaration. In the county, it's a state of local emergency. And it just recognizes that there is some exigent threat to the health, welfare, and safety of the community. And in some cases, these are done simply procedurally. So I'll give you an example of COVID, where certain funding was available, but you had to be in a state of emergency in order to get those funds from the state or from the federal government. In the case of our burn ban right now, our burn ban is enacted under a state of local emergency. We're in drought conditions, except for the interstate as I was headed in this morning, or this afternoon rather. They got plenty of rain, but there's no rain out here. We're currently under a burn ban in Lee County, and that's done under the authority of a state of local emergency. But in the case of a hurricane, not only does it empower the local governments to be able to do and take the emergency actions necessary to protect the public, but it also sets in motion a series of funding resources that are available to be able to fund and finance the response and the recovery.
So legal declaration.
Correct.
Right. And so when you're in the EOC and you're under a state of emergency, and we in this case, we have a storm that's approaching, we have an incident command system that is put in place or activated, as well as a unified command structure. And that through the EOC is what maintains plurality in decision-making, where you have all the different jurisdictions together. The building belongs to the county. They built it, it's theirs, they staff it, everybody has a desk. Every jurisdiction has 1 or 2 desks, the utilities, everybody's in there. But there's really a sense of plurality around decision-making. Unified command is also, in my case, meeting with city and county manager, other cities in the jurisdiction once, twice a day. But Ben, I'm going to pick on you if you could just lead us into what that looks like and how that plays out inside the EOC.
Sure. So the chart that you see on the slide here is part of what we call the National Incident Management Structure System, what they call NIMS. And this is used on a motor vehicle crash, on a major crime scene investigation, on day-to-day incidents. But then it scales up to be able to answer the need for structure and organization in very large disasters like we saw with Hurricane Ian. And this is actually the format that we use within our Emergency Operations Center as well. So we have all of these different branches that you see at the bottom: operations, planning, logistics, finance, and admin. There's also an incident commander, there's an information, a liaison officer who's working with the municipalities. So all of these specific positions that have specific roles and responsibilities that are outlined and allocated to those individuals that are serving in those roles.
Great. And anybody, Chief Dalton, do you have anything that you want to add about incident command? Because, I think it's also important to talk about what happens in EOC, but once we get back on the island, there's also a unified command structure that's set up here on the island. This time it happened to be in a tent because the buildings were not available. Maybe you could talk about that and how you organize. And Lieutenant Chief Barbeau, please fill in.
Sure. Once we got back on the island and did get rolling and some help started to come in from outside, we had what's called an incident management team. And we did meet in a tent right in the parking lot out here, right outside the building. And we had a representative from every agency that was out here working. The chief and I sat in on it. Lieutenant or someone else from the SO was here all the time. And then we wound up having... Overall, we had 36 different police departments respond from around the state. So not at the same time, all throughout the months of the recovery process. And we would have a ranking officer from whatever group was in town, and they would meet with us as well. The Director of Emergency Management for the state, Kevin Guthrie, he attended one of them. There was always a state emergency management representative and almost always a FEMA representative as well. So that would basically be an example of unified command.
And I think Maria was at that table several times as well.
Yes, along with LCEC, so really bring back that network. And we met for the first few weeks every single day at 9 a.m. So getting over here and biking there was quite fun.
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
City Manager, I did want to say, it is an important system. We all learn about it in the hurricane conferences we go to, but early on, communication is difficult. We understand that, but Public Works is a small staff, and we're getting work requests from multiple agencies, honestly, agencies I've never heard of. So, these requests need to go through that incident command system, one centralized facility. So the resources that we have, limited resources, are being used in the best way.
And one thing that I want to clarify, when I mentioned plurality in the EOC, is that, and I want to address this because I've been asked this question several times, EOC doesn't mean that the county has to approve Sanibel's request or Fort Myers' request if we're making a request to the state. It goes through that. It goes through it for tracking purposes. And it's all logged and kept where our systems being out here on the island might work one day and not the other day. But that's accurate, right?
That is, yeah. In fact, in statute, the county has the responsibility to accept the requests from the municipalities and to pass them to the state. And if the state needs resources, then they further pass that request up to the federal government to support.
And likewise, it doesn't prevent us from having conversations with outside agencies like the state or FEMA, but then we also communicate those back to the EOC so we can make sure that everybody knows what we're all doing.
David,
Scott had them.
Can I add just one more thing?
Yeah, please.
I'd like to say the fire district's role and City of Sanibel's role in the immediate response. We are local experts. We are here to provide our citizens and our community the best service possible. I think it's unfair to assume and expect the county to come in right away, especially on day 1, day 2, day 3, and expect for them to come in and provide all of these assets. They have an entire county to respond to. They have to make a plan. They have to order assets, or assets have got to come in. They've got to travel through the storm. How do we get barges down here where a storm just came through? So I think it's really important to understand that the fire district, we're responsible from the toll all the way to Blind Pass, and that initial response we should be the main responsible individuals, the main responsible parties as far as your fire district and the City of Sanibel in ensuring that we are doing everything that we need to do right here as far as boots on the ground. In terms of the unified command, the Sanibel Station 171 on Palm Ridge was the main command hub before we could get those assets, before these state assets and these county resources came in, and they assisted us and took a lot of the weight off of our shoulders. But those initial couple days, we set up VHF system. Every agency that came in, Public Works, we had VHF, we had PD liaisons sitting next to us at the table. If you came through Station 171 on Palm Ridge, the bay was an absolute disaster, and there were people everywhere.
And that includes Captiva Fire, sheriffs.
That's exactly right. Yeah, all the way to forestry, any state asset. FWC were here, FHP. We had tons of assets. And how do we communicate with them with no cell service? And our radio was lacking a little bit because of the storm. So, in my opinion, with what we had and the magnitude of the storm and how we responded, we did a very phenomenal job at all agencies.
Great. Lieutenant, last word? Yeah, the last word, or do you want to move on?
Yeah, just the importance of this system. I know we were talking about it in broader terms, but I think all of us being in a barrier island community are ready to be self-sufficient in the initial response so that we can get that work done quickly, the foundation of what we need to do. Beyond that, this instant command system and going through the EOC, it makes sure that when we send in requests and we need equipment, that it's a streamlined process, it gets done quickly, but it also ensures that we're not getting a bunch of redundant requests and wasting time and resources for things that aren't needed, or they're sending more stuff than is needed. So I think it's a very good system. It's certainly an improvement over some of the incidents that occurred before we had this kind of system in place.
Yeah.
Dana, I'm sorry, just one more quick example from Ian that I think is, it kind of tells part of the story here. We first got a lot of our responders out into the field Thursday morning after Wednesday's landfall, and we amassed a lot of resource requests. Ice, food, water, heavy equipment. I mean, you name it, we had a resource request for it. Thursday night, I don't know if you all remember what happened that evening just north of us on I-75, but the interstate was closed because of flooding in Northport. And so all of these assets that we had and commodities and all these things that we had ordered throughout the day, and the cavalry is coming, except they're not, because the interstate's closed. And so I think one of the things that's really important, and the picture here illustrates it as well, is that we're not dealing with a well-controlled situation, we're dealing with a disaster. And those disasters are going to have impacts and changes and nuances that occur for weeks and weeks and weeks. And so even as we knew exactly what we needed and knew where we could get it, at that point we couldn't even get it because all of those assets were stopped on I-75.
In a sidebar, I'm told that we have 90 people who are watching on Facebook Live, so thank you for joining us. Scott, I want to move to you on this slide. This is West Gulf Drive on Sanibel, and Chief Barbeau talked about the initial push operation, getting authorization to use the equipment that you had because your staff wasn't here. And that's your primary function during this, is to start that emergency push. You didn't have assets. Why don't you describe what this scene is in front of us?
Sure, Dana. I mean, the response challenges were numerous. I mean, I won't, we've already spoken about the causeway being out, but for Public Works being on island, it was really just like the large volume of debris blocking roadways. I mean, close to this location, I remember the afternoon after the storm, I was standing at the intersection of Tarpon Bay Road and West Gulf Drive, and I honestly didn't know where I was. I mean, one area was blocked with vegetation, the other direction was blocked with homes, and the road was covered in silt from the storm. So, I mean, Public Works initially, the first push, it's Public Works. We use our consultant, debris consultant, Crowder Gulf, when they can get out here. But at this time, when this picture was taken, they were not on island yet. So Public Works' main task, the first push, is to clear pretty much one lane of access. We want to create access for police and fire, emergency responders to get to the people in need. That is priority to get to the people that need help. And then from there, we call it a debris clear from edge line to edge line, and that's when debris is, piled high in the right of way. And that's when the city's contractor for this event was Crowder Gulf. They'll come in and start hauling. But just other challenges for the city and Public Works staff initially, heavy equipment is pushed hard. We constantly have mechanical issues. With this storm, we had decisions on what equipment to evacuate and leave, and Dana and I had conversations, and I think there were some very good decisions. We took about 50% of our equipment off, and we left some on, because you look at that, and if you take it all off and the causeway's out, which we had, you have no equipment on island to recover. If you leave it all on island and it's all destroyed by the surge, you're in trouble. So we had equipment on island that we were able to do what we needed to do, mechanic-wise, extremely busy, saltwater corrosion issues. And once the causeway was fixed, I remember coming in mornings and there were, police vehicles. I think we had 5 to 8, 9 vehicles lined up at the garage waiting to get, tires plugged or nails removed before the mechanic was able to arrive. So just unbelievable. I also want to touch on challenges that the city, once we started the haul operation, the city has, pre-approved debris management sites. They're approved through the DEP. The city has 18 total, but really there's one site that is a significant size for hurricane recovery located on Island Inn Road. Now, this site is the main site we've used for Hurricane Charlie, Wilma, and we had no issues at all. That site was able to handle the whole recovery effort, and just the debris field that Ian, gave to the city. We knew early on that Island Inn Road site would not be large enough to handle it. So we have some agreements that we worked with SCCF, Ding Darling, Lee County. So I want to say thank you to them, and we were able to permit some additional sites to get us through Ian recovery. So that's something that the city will have to look into some more. And I want to touch base, other issues, initially down power lines, there's hazards like that. You want to make sure power's off. So all those things kind of slow recovery. But even early on, I was amazed when there was debris, piled up in the shared use path. And I know with property owners that were still on island, we had, residents walking, riding bicycles. I believe I even saw, baby carriages being pushed down Periwinkle at one point. So that does slow down recovery efforts a little bit for Public Works. We want to make sure we're not, hurting anybody on the road. So that's why it is important to follow, the evacuation guidelines, because it helps us to get the island, back as quick as we can, so then when the official notification is made for people to come back on, it's safe for everyone.
And so we're going to move right to that subject of evacuation. So evacuation, each organization that's represented here has some specific role leading up to the event for helping islanders to evacuate, whether they're residents, seasonal, full-time residents, businesses, or visitors asking, what do you mean I can't fulfill my reservation at Tween Waters? I've never seen a hurricane. What's that thing coming? And so there has to be an education process that goes along with that. Maria's work should be the starting point in this discussion right now. We're going to talk about public sentiment regarding evacuation in a minute, but please talk about the work that FISH undertakes every year. Really, as I know that you were prepared to talk about it as part of our partners meeting last year. Just lead us into that conversation about evacuation.
Sure. So our goal is to make sure everybody has a plan, and that plan includes evacuation. That they have a plan A, B, and C, because when a storm is coming, when you don't develop that plan, you can find individuals just kind of saying, well, I don't know what to do, so I choose to do nothing. And that could be very dangerous, and it happens for all sorts of reasons. So when a storm is coming, our main focus is to remove any barrier in someone's way that prevents them from evacuating. For some, that can be a financial hardship, and we will address those needs. For others, it could be mobility issues. Simply, they could be unsure of what it means to go into a shelter. They're not aware that they can take their pet to a shelter, or they just don't have the technology available to make reservations. So there's a ton of things that will stop someone from evacuating. But as I said, when a storm is coming, that's what we want to make sure that everyone does. Because when they don't evacuate, a lot of the things that have come up in this panel is due to having to respond to the people that are on the island and are unsafe and are in just a hazardous environment. So when the storm was coming, we made the initial calls to everybody on our list. The other nonprofit organizations are critical to this because not everybody ends up being on Fish's radar. So from SECF to Community House to DING, everybody puts out notifications to kind of get their planning in place, call Fish if they don't know what to do. And we had numerous calls, specifically starting Sunday night when people realized what the storm was going to be. And I think our last evacuation, aided by staff, was the day before at around 11:02. We got someone successfully off the island, and we ended up doing, between those 2 days, about 100 evacuations, either some with financial assistance, some just, again, navigating, figuring out where they needed to go in the interim.
And everybody else's role during this period is setting out barricades, getting electronic message boards out, making sure dumpsters are collected, shade structures are down, all of those things that you have to prepare for a windstorm where things could be flying around. Emergency management is also preparing their assets. So when they're all going to leave, we know when there's an evacuation order, public safety leaves, and they're not able to respond until the emergency is over. And for time, I'm going to move on to this slide, why Americans don't evacuate, right? And 43% damage, they're concerned that if their property is damaged, that there would be looting. 34% tragic overconfidence. It's not coming here, it's going north. I saw it on TV a few days ago. It's going up to the Panhandle, or the storm surge never comes. That never comes. But we have a Cat 4, Cat 5 storm, and so people who can't evacuate with their pets, or they believe they can't evacuate with their pets, 34%. There's a cost to evacuation. 14% have some form of disability, which Maria just mentioned, and they're there to help to find solutions for folks. And transportation, I don't have transportation to evacuate. Mike or Lieutenant, I wanted to, if you could lead us in this discussion, what do you think can be emphasized now as lessons learned? We've had a Cat 4 or 5 storm landed here. What are your thoughts on
Yeah,
this?
I think addressing the one here that's the top on it, for the damage, I mean, the first thing that I would say to everybody when it comes to evacuating is if you have a serious storm coming, there's no reason to stay here. As far as damage to your home, there's really nothing you can do to affect that outcome when the storm is here. Everything you can do happens in your preparation. And as far as the looting, I think that comes into, again, that community partnership between public safety and the community, and them feeling confident, knowing that the response is going to be strong enough to protect their properties in their absence, and also that people know that everything we do when we return to the island, I mean, every ounce of our effort is geared towards stabilizing the island to get you guys back, to take care of your homes, to take care of your properties, to take care of your businesses. There's nobody on this panel or in any of our departments that has an arbitrary or capricious desire to keep you away. You know, there is a balance there, and I know we'll probably get into it a little more, between the compassionate response and the security and safety aspects of it. So, you know, we do need to make sure that immediate hazards are addressed so people can come back. But my main point is really that don't worry about the looting, don't worry about the damage. There's nothing in your house that's worth your life. I mean, we have people in this community, 70 some odd people who died in Lee County because in this storm, and I don't think there's a single one of them who would now make that same decision that, yeah, I should stay in my home and protect my stuff. There's nothing there that makes it worthwhile. If there's a serious storm, just evacuate.
Great. And Ben, I want to go to you because I skipped over one thing. I want you to just talk briefly about an evacuation order. We saw the slides before the storm approaching, increasing in intensity, moving up the coast. It's not something that is a willy-nilly decision in terms of the evacuation order. And then also, you and I talked about an interesting fact or slide that you saw when you were attending the governor's hurricane conference about this issue.
Sure. When a storm is forecast to impact the area, we start with the National Weather Service forecast from the National Hurricane Center. We start to analyze the data from that forecast. We also then work with Tampa Bay Weather, so our partners at the National Weather Service up in Tampa Bay, which is the local forecast office for Lee County. And we work with both of those pieces of information, work with our plans. We have discussions about the most appropriate actions to take, and we start discussing those recommended actions with our our lead policymakers within county government. And that process goes on. It takes several hours to get the forecast, to get the information, to work with all the different partners. When we're getting close to an evacuation decision, that also includes having calls with our municipal partners. So when we are getting close to that decision, we initiate calls with city managers, with elected officials, with all of our partners to make sure that everybody knows exactly where we're at. And we do that every 6 hours. So in a couple of hours that it takes to process that forecast and go through all of those steps, a new forecast comes out every 6 hours. And as we get closer to landfall, we get intermediate advisories, which are every 3 hours. So that entire process and workflow goes on every 3 hours in the 24 hours leading up to landfall. At the National Hurricane Conference this year, there was a presentation from the National Hurricane Center, and they shared some slides and some data on evacuations and grouping individuals into, will you evacuate early, will you evacuate late, will you not evacuate? And there's a tremendous amount of behavioral research that goes into will people actually heed the evacuation orders and evacuate? And most of that research lands somewhere between 15 to 22% of individuals that are asked to evacuate will not evacuate. The hurricane Cat 5 coming your direction, and they still will not evacuate. And so I think the challenge for us is it's not the other 78%, because we can work with the timing. The question is, for those last 22%, how do we get that message or improve that message so that we can get them to safety?
Great, thanks. So we're going to move right into the discussion about apathy and what causes apathy, what we saw, anecdotal information from the people that are here on the table. But as I mentioned before, it's going north. We saw it, it's going to the Panhandle, it's not coming here. And you get this false sense of security after storms. There's alerts that we receive, there's potential evacuation orders, or there is an evacuation order. And that's one of the reasons why nobody takes an evacuation order lightly, because if all of the Fort Myers, Lee County, Collier County area has to evacuate, and then the storm turns in a different direction, people are upset about that, right? And that also adds to potential apathy when the next event, because there's this confidence built that the storm is going to turn away. So I'm going to look to Maria's, and as you were talking during the preparation of the storm, I know that you and your colleagues had lots of conversation with residents on the island, encouraging them to evacuate. What were you hearing?
When we talk to the residents, specifically those in that 23%, a lot of their past experience works against them. You know, they were talking to me about Hurricane Irma and, you know, the saturation from the media saying the storm surge is coming, the storm surge is coming, yet it never came. So they really were confident that they could stay in their ground level homes or, you know, just prepare enough to stay safe. And for some, I think the apathy came just a little bit too late, and that's when we try to jump in to try to prepare them as best as we can and help with those evacuation efforts. But as a community, I think we just try to address the emotions behind it and just letting people know that there's no judgment coming from us. We're just trying to make sure that they understand the gravity of the situation when a storm is coming, to listen to the city, to listen to the correct media sources, and to really, unfortunately, prepare for the worst and hope for the best when there's an incoming storm, because it's all about preparedness. It's all about when an evacuation or mandatory order does come, I'm hopeful the majority of the island at that point would have already evacuated. You know, don't wait for that. If you can leave, if you have the ability to, you know, make those plans ahead of time, please do so.
And maybe one of the Chief Dalton, maybe you could speak first about the difference between shelter in place, which is what Maria was just talking about. I'm going to get my home ready and I'm going to hunker down and I feel that I'm going to be safe. Shelter in place is when there's a direct order that comes out from emergency management saying it's safe to stay in your home versus evacuation.
Yeah, a shelter in place for us doesn't apply for hurricanes. The storm surge is the number one killer in any storm. So shelter in place might be something for a chemical leak or something like that. And as far as wanting to evacuate and not wanting to evacuate, after Hurricane Charlie, we estimated we had less than 200 people that stayed on the island. We were taking 200 people a day off by boat, the fire department and our department. And we carried luggage, we carried people in wheelchairs, we carried birds in cages, and this is not exaggerating. Many, many dogs and cats. I think it is the two previous storms didn't have an associated storm surge with it, and I think, you know, that apathy set in. I was talking to one of our retirees just a little bit ago, and he ran the hurricane seminar back when Hurricane Charlie hit in 2004, and in June of that year, Charlie hit in August. In June of that year when they did the seminar, he said they had 27 people at the seminar because we hadn't had a major storm hit in a while. The next year after Charlie, they had 4 different sessions of 400 people. So I think the next few years will have everybody's attention, but I do think we, as a community, we need to work on the evacuation thing. There was no reason for 1,000 people to stay on the island. And as Lieutenant said, you know, if you could replace everything in your home, you know, you can't replace human life. That's what I want to stress. So pack up what you consider dear to you and simply drive off the island, you know, say a day or two before the storm. I wouldn't even give it 1 day, I'd give it 2 to 3 days. And that will also prevent some of the evacuations that we had to do that were extremely labor intensive, and equipment needed for it was, I would just ask anybody, what do you think is more reasonable to do? Drive off the island a couple days before the storm in your car, or have 4 police officers come to your home and get you out of a garage where you're pinned under a car because you slipped in the muck, and then they got to take you out to the beach, and a Coast Guard helicopter has to come and fly you off the island. Those resources could be used much more efficiently and in a better way, especially when the solution to that is very simple. And practically everybody on the island does it every day. You start your car and drive off the island. That's simply all you have to do. So,
Yeah, to that end, I would say another important thing is that evacuating before the storm gives you control over your destiny. You get to decide where you go, you get to decide when you go, you get to decide what you bring. And if you end up out here and end up having to get put on a helicopter, I mean, Chief Dalton is nice enough to transport birds in cages, I guess. But, you know, where you end up after that, if you don't have that plan in advance, you know, you may end up in a school gym on a cot with, you know, dozens of other people, and that might not be where you want to be. So, you know, take that time to be proactive, take some personal responsibility to develop a plan, have it in place, and, you know, don't wait for that evacuation order to come in to start developing a plan. That evacuation order is that last minute, hey, get the heck out of there thing. You should be ready to hop in the car, turn the key, and go when that happens, not start packing, not round up the dog, not find your records, not find your paperwork. All that stuff should be done well in advance. And one of the advantages of a hurricane, as opposed to a lot of other natural disasters, is you have a lot of warning. You have a lot of time to make those preparations compared to a tornado or a wildfire or something else. So, you know, take advantage of that and have a plan in place and be ready to act on it.
And Chief Dalton segued into the rescue slide. So if we have an evacuation order and folks are apathetic about that, or they feel that they're going to be safe in the confines of their home, then there inevitably will be rescued. And Chief Dalton talked about the resources that were required, the helicopters that came in, and there were people that were rescued off the island before we ever set foot and knew that it was underway because they're coming in through conducting air rescues. And then the search and rescue that goes on. Search and rescue would still continue on a door-to-door search to make sure nobody is trapped, but we can minimize that if people will heed that advice and take that rescue. Chief Barbeau, complexities about rescues. I know Chief Dalton mentioned some of those already.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the major issues you run into is communications, always communications, especially in the early stages, and search and rescue is always done in the early stages. So we had to, as I stated earlier, set up a VHF radio system so we could coordinate and give radios to each assisting agency. The search and rescue efforts are USAR, fire, EMS is involved, LCSO, everybody at this table, Sanibel PD, and everybody's on board, and we've got localized area that everybody's searching, and you're going through a mad method or controlled chaos of trying to make sure you cover the entire island. USAR will then come in behind and go door to door, and handle the entire island through their grid mapping system, which is pretty extensive. But the resources are extensive. We also had to make sure that how do we get people off the island? Sometimes the boats aren't accessible. Do we have bad weather? Do we need to rush them off island? Director Abes is excellent in communicating with the Sanibel Fire and Rescue District. I believe it was day 2. We were able to get a flyover from Lee County EMS helicopter and highlight 9 landing zones throughout the island. On a regular day, right now, we have 2. That's our normal. We have one behind our Station 1 and one near Station 172 where we can fly individuals that need to get out fairly quickly. We had spotted 9. So this just kind of goes to highlight the coordinated effort and how well all of these agencies sitting here at the table, including state agencies that came in, work together. But you wanted a coordinated effort. You didn't want individuals just kind of going blindly. Another thing that we provided was local area experts, our fire district personnel and Sanibel PD. We know the island very well. So we would actually group one staff member from our agencies to go with external agencies that came in to assist to make sure they knew where they were going, how to get there, and how not to get lost because, like we stated earlier, everything was unrecognizable.
And I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit. So if I skip over some of the plan discussion we had, we'll pick that up in lessons learned. But I want the Chief Dalton to talk about, and also the Lieutenant to talk about checkpoints, because it's a necessary requirement when we're on a barrier island. We have a hurricane reentry passes that we issue both for Captiva and for Sanibel. And remember, response includes actions to save lives, actions to protect property. Chief?
Yes, we've had a hurricane reentry pass system for years now. It's served us well in the past, but we never had a situation where we had where we needed to pass for such an extensive period of time as we did this time. So we're working on some ideas to upgrade that pass system, and I'm going to work with our finance department about trying to get a survey out to our residents and ask some simple questions on because we can make the pass system more secure, but it's going to slow everything down. So some residents want convenience and some want security. So we're going to try and get a better handle on that and see which direction we should go with that. But it was a challenge. That pass system is a challenge because people can copy them. And not everybody who was issued a pass used it properly. Some of them transferred it to a contractor who transferred it to a subcontractor who transferred it to a group of laborers, and then they came out and just ran amok with someone's pass. So so we got our challenges. It's not perfect. It keeps looky-loos out, that's for sure. But if the pass is not, if it's transferred, I guess I would say, if it's transferred from the rightful applicant for the pass to others, you just lose control. There's no way around that. So we're going to work on first off finding out what the residents want, and then try and tailor our system to meet those wants.
And remember, Captiva is tied to our pass system as well. I've talked with residents on Captiva who are looking for an improved system too, Lieutenant.
Yeah, and I can actually speak on this on both sides of it, because as an island resident, I also dealt with the checkpoints and the curfews and what have you, and so did my family. And it's important to strike that balance between not just keeping the island safe, keeping your homes and properties secure, but it's also important to provide space for these guys to do the clearing and do the debris hauling and all the other stuff without having high volumes of traffic and whatever. So, there's a lot more reasons to the pass system than just sitting there and being selective about who comes and goes. It's keeping that access to necessary travel on and off of the island, and to keep, like the curfew, which I know isn't in here, but turned out to be an important tool for us. It wasn't about trying to keep the residents in at night or anything like that. What really the big benefit for us was that it gave us a reason, a legal reason to stop and encounter anybody that was out after the curfew time and figure out what they were doing. And if they were one of our residents and they were, they had a purpose in being there, then no problem. They were directed maybe back to their house or something like that, but we weren't out there loading up buses full of people to arrest them or anything. But we certainly stopped and encountered several questionable people out there and were able to, I feel confident, interrupted a lot of activity that shouldn't have been going on out here. So I know that it's not convenient. I've been on the receiving end of it as well, but it's worthwhile. It's important. It's inconvenient, but it's important.
So the definition of ready is completely prepared. And so as Hurricane Ian changed our community's sense of readiness on a personal level, about evacuation, about preparedness, about return to the island, about convenience versus security. And just real quickly, so we can get to lessons learned. Ben, this year, different situation, even if you can have tornadoes spin off of a tropical storm, right?
Yeah, we talked about the process of making the decision to evacuate or call for an evacuation, and I think this year is going to be very unique because of two key factors that we'll be considering if we do have an event that looks like it may impact the area. So the first is there's a lot of debris from construction that is still going on across the community. Show of hands, who's got construction debris? I see everybody online is raising their hands as well. I've got construction debris in my yard. And as much as we'd like to bring all of that stuff in, it's very difficult in some cases to secure all of that, the supplies and the equipment. So there's a lot of debris that is there just due to the rebuilding and the recovery efforts that are still ongoing. So that's factor number one. The other factor is that normally most of our homes are, easily able to withstand tropical storm force winds, and in some cases even up to hurricane force winds. And in the state that they're in today, they are not necessarily able to provide the same protection. So in the case of tropical storms, where we may not have called for evacuations in the past, we'll have some difficult decisions this year because there's these new factors that are introduced as we continue to recover.
And that's not people being gun shy. That's the measured response is different because of the debris and the circumstances that we face on our properties now. So that's part of a measured response. And when we get together as part of our team members to discuss the approaching storm and the threats that are with it, we have to measure those factors such as debris that could become airborne and could injure people. I'm going to skip over this slide, and Scott, and I'll ask you to come talk about that during lessons learned. But this slide simply shows all the vehicles that we had to get over, and not all the vehicles, just a portion of the vehicles we had to get over by barge while we're waiting for the state, who did a record job in getting the causeway open to vehicular traffic. We expected this was going to be our mode of transportation for many months. We never anticipated that causeway could be repaired. So we're going to move to lesson learned and ask Chief Barbeau to begin the discussion on this.
So I'm going to preface this conversation for Bob Moore and everybody else. In no way are we saying that electric vehicles are a hazard. They were a hazard in this situation, and there's ways I think that we're going to be able to mitigate that. It's important to note that this Hurricane Ian highlighted an issue with EVs, and specifically it was the batteries that were an issue. And the reasoning that we got after a little bit of investigation is that the batteries corrode with salt water, they short circuit, And this happens within as little as a few hours, so it's not immediate, and it also keeps corroding as time goes on. Once the cell dries out, the connection points crystallizes with the salt water, and they can then ignite and have issues. So that created some major concerns. What our staff did is we removed a total of 215 assets from structures and homes. As a reminder, we were completely disconnected from outside life off island. We just felt that this was what needed to be done. And it's funny, prepping for this presentation, I'm looking online, and almost every reporting news piece by the time we got home at 11 p.m., 12 p.m. at night, I'm not watching the news, but they were telling individuals to remove the vehicles out of the structures from 50 feet. So we got assistance from a state mission. We have tow truck companies along with our fire trucks that went to 215 homes and removed assets, golf carts, electric vehicles. We did have fires that started with EVs after the fact. We did have no fires that occurred while the EVs were inside of the structures, which is really great news. And in my opinion, that is our team and our staff being successful in the mission that we accomplished to do, which was to save structures and not assets. As far as lesson learned and how can we fix this, let's get them off island. Really, really that simple. Home watches, tow truck companies, if you're out of town, they will come and drive them and bring them to the airport or bring them to a parking lot in high grounds, and you will never have an issue. Let's be smart. It doesn't mean, let's not save our ecosystem and buy electric vehicles. I love the concept. I love the technology. But I think there's ways that we can make sure that our island stays secure by removing what could be a potential hazard.
And I'm going to change the slide. We can continue to talk about lessons learned, but really on a macro level and around evacuation. But, the lieutenant said it earlier in his comment, is that if you don't evacuate, you have to be rescued. You're not going to have the choice of where you're going to go, maybe for a few days, maybe longer. Preparing lessons learned that we've all learned. We have choices to make. So whoever wants to start this conversation, Maria, maybe you could talk about lessons learned around evacuation from your perspective, or whatever you'd like to contribute.
Sure. So we found that with evacuations, of that 23% that didn't want to, the ones that did were ultimately because a neighbor or someone else who was concerned talked to them in tandem with fish. So definitely looking to your neighbors, looking to the community, and really engaging in the fact that, we should collectively choose to evacuate. Because when it does happen, we all have to pivot into the direction of figuring out what we have to do. And I think we were good on response. We worked well together. But I would just say more of a push and work with media, work with whoever we can to make sure that people really take these storms seriously, because the response effort on the other side, when it doesn't happen, just becomes a little bit more complicated. And I guess on that note, what I learned with actual recovery and response was, I guess, that 70% of a solution is a solution. I'm very type A, and just figuring out that whatever we could do in that moment, and whatever we worked together to do, just ultimately was for the good of the greater community. And I think we generally did that fairly well.
And my alarm's going to go off pretty soon, but maybe we could just start with the lieutenant, go down the table quickly.
Yeah, I mean, for my part, my family evacuated, so I'll tell you just on a personal level that's what we opted to do, and we always opt to do it well in advance. One of the things that I always ask my wife when we have a storm coming, big storm coming up here towards Florida, how long do you want to be in a house with 2 kids, 2 cats, 2 dogs, a bunch of birds, with no air conditioning, no power, no Wi-Fi for the kids, none of this stuff? And the answer is pretty much none of that time do they want to be there with the air conditioning out and all that. So make good friends with people in Georgia. That's my personal advice, because that's what we did. We have friends up there in the Atlanta area, and my family drives up days in advance of a storm hitting Florida. They make a vacation out of it, and they stay until the storm passes. If there's not a big problem, they come right back down here. If there is a problem, they continue on and make a tour of all of our well-meaning friends and acquaintances up and down the East Coast. So, but they were gone until really early November this time because of the damage and being unable to occupy our house. So it turned out to be good that we had made a plan, good that they were ready, and good that they acted on it, because I don't know what we would have done if they were still here. So, you know,
I mean, I'll make it quick. I mean, I'm a pickup sticks guy. That's what Public Works does. But just to reiterate, you know,
Wait,
evacuate.
let me just clarify that. Scott is not a pickup sticks guy. He's one of the most intelligent people we have on our team.
who also picks
He
up
also
sticks.
picks up sticks, right?
Well, thank you. And I work with an incredible team at Public Works and Utilities. I'm proud to work with them. But again, just to reiterate, if you evacuate, it does speed up our recovery process, makes things safer, and
Chief?
I would say the same thing. My biggest concern is that, you know, we will not evacuate. I have heard that there are folks in the community that are almost being advocates for not evacuating, and I don't understand that. I never will. You know, and somehow we miss the message as a community. If, you know, back in '04, we could have 200 people stay on the island, and just through this past hurricane, we had over 1,000. So you can replace everything in your house, you know, and you can still live if you know, as long as you evacuate it. And if not, there's no guarantee. And for some of the folks, it's probably lucky we got to them when we did, because there's just no guarantee. Evacuate and keep yourself safe. Listen to the news and listen to the city's communication. We communicated constantly every day. You'll know when it's safe to come back, and you'll know when it's safe to start rebuilding.
Chief?
Yeah, pretty simple. For me and my team, we never want to go through this again for our community and ourselves. This is ongoing recovery. It's been tough. It's been really hard. It's a lot of work, a lot of hours, and that's simple. Just lessons learned. I don't want to do it again.
Ben?
I think two quick things. First of all, I think we have an obligation from a lessons learned perspective to, you know, this is unique because it is such a large storm that had such tremendous impacts. And so it is an opportunity for us, a unique opportunity to look at how our plans worked, how we were able to employ them, what worked and what didn't work, and not just at the tactics level, but at the policy level and at the ordinance or, you know, all of the different legal structures from governance and all the way through all of the plans and all of the parties and everybody that works together to be able to address the situation. On an individual level, I think it's very simple, and this slide really sums it up. You need to have a plan, and you need to have a disaster supply kit. There's a disaster preparedness tax holiday that's coming up in about a week to 10 days. It's a great opportunity to look at your plan, refresh your plan, and get that kit out and see what needs to be replaced and make sure that you're ready for the season.
And I'm going to end by not piling on, but adding to that. Our emergency operations plan has to change because of the storm. As Ben just said, it's such an unusual, catastrophic event that we just experienced. So all the lessons that we learned here have to be packed into that plan. And one of them is people didn't evacuate. And how are we going to respond? So we'll adjust our plan in terms of what that response will be to the best extent possible. But I just want to implore you, and anybody who's listening online, and this will be our messaging that we will continue as we get into the hurricane season, that if it's coming, if it's forecasted, if that cone is in our general area, make your plan to evacuate. Do not wait until government issues that legal notification which triggers other activities, so our council can act quickly, the county can act quickly, we can be eligible for funds. That's too late. We want you out so you can be safe. We want people out so these folks can do their job safely and efficiently. So think about that as you prepare. Be ready. Hurricane season begins on June 1st. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to turn it back over to Bob Carey. Thank you to our panelists. You all can stay or you can leave. I'm going to
Okay, so first of all, would you please offer another round of applause for our just excellent panelists and for our city manager. We're really thrilled to have the expertise that's coming to this event. So bear with us for just a couple more minutes, and we're just going to get a little bit of more community data from you. And one quick thing I want to say before we get into that is that we do have an online, we do have a resources table out in the lobby, and Fish is going to have some hurricane preparedness information packets available for people too. So remember, that's going to be a great resource. So we're going to ask you two quick questions, so if you just bear with us, so we can get some input from you all, and so you get a chance to kind of weigh in here. So again, just to orient you really quickly to this tool, you can scan the QR code. It should take you right to that page. You should see something that says instructions. I see some thumbs up coming in, so I can tell some of you are on there. And again, your other option is you can open a browser, you can go to www.menti.com, and you can enter this code 57439540. But for sake of time, I'm going to keep us moving. So if we could go to the next slide. So we want to find out what kind of questions you have for our emergency response panel. So the one thing I should say is that it is difficult to provide an opportunity during these events to always have a really robust Q&A section. But we want to provide an opportunity to go back to our panelists and pose them some of these questions so we can release these later in writing. And so we were able to actually put that together, and we're about to release that for the last event around buildings and the natural environment. So that's something we'd like to be able to do here. And we want to capture your questions. So what questions do you have for our emergency response panel after you've heard tonight's programming? What do you want to be able to pose to them for questions? Okay, so I see 6 coming in.
We had 87 last time, so we'll take a few minutes.
So we'll see if you guys can up the ante here and ask a few more questions. All right, so we've got 9. Okay, we know it takes a second to put these in here.
I think it's the case with all of these events that we're in an ongoing conversation. So tonight's not the first and last time we'll be able to talk about these topics. Same with the previous community events that we've run. We'll continue to unpack these issues.
Okay, we'll give just another couple minutes here. Okay, 22. Okay. Okay, I see this starting to level out, slowly start to level out. Okay, we've got a couple more. Oh, you guys are getting a few more in here. Okay. Okay, I think for sake of time, we're going to keep moving to the next. So I'm going to have Richard press the arrow, and actually what you'll be able to see is you'll be able to see the kinds of questions that are coming in. So we've got some expressions of gratitude, some observations, questions about debris, about overhead power lines. So again, we're going to try and get these posed directly to panel members so they can answer whatever's in their wheelhouse. And then we have one last question for you. So we're going to move on to the last question here. So Richard, if you don't mind hitting the arrow. So after emergency response comes a longer recovery. And so this is going to help guide us as we figure out continued programming that people are really interested in hearing about and having access to. So what would you like to hear more about related to our community's recovery? So what are other topics, now that you've heard this really in-depth deep dive into emergency response, what are the things that you might like to hear about that tack on to sort of the recovery that comes after that emergency response? Okay. We see everything slowly trickling in. Actually, I think what we're going to do is while people are continuing to put their answers in, we'll give everybody another moment or two, but then we could probably start on
Sure.
our reminders.
So we're going to keep this question open on your phones, but we're going to switch, Richard, back to the slides for a minute, and want to reemphasize a couple of points that Carrie made earlier tonight, and that is that this coalition represents a lot of different groups in our community, but ultimately it's meant to represent every citizen in our community in Sanibel and Captiva, and we really are committed to finding ways to bring as much engagement and interaction and involvement and channels to hear the voices of our community members. So one of the first stabs at that, as Carrie mentioned, is the creation of working groups to do some deeper dives on some specific topics that we've heard are most useful to community members. So just wanted to give one more plug here. If you're thinking you're on the fence, but after tonight you're ready to dive in and be a part of one of these working groups, we're going to be closing this, well, this would be a soft close to the sign up for those groups at the end of this week, just so we can begin to get the ball rolling. So again, on your way out, we have sign up forms for the working groups, or you can do it online using this QR code.
And I would say feel free, if you know others that would be very interested in this, that weren't able to attend tonight's event, certainly to open that website with your QR code, feel free to share that, to text it to folks.
And one of the other pieces that we want to do is make sure we've got a good communications channel established so that we can stay in touch as the group evolves, as new programming comes up, as we're looking for other ways to get additional feedback. So if you haven't yet signed up just to be on our email list, there are also forms in the lobby to do that on your way out, or online, this QR code. The previous website was like 5,000 characters, so I didn't include it on the slide, but this one's a little bit shorter, so if it's easier for you to type in the URL, you can do that. So that really brings us to the close of tonight's event. We look forward to continuing to have discussions around what it means for us to be resilient, and Sanibel and Captiva really are cutting-edge communities in terms of the vision behind them. And as painful as this experience has been, there's a real opportunity for us to be visionaries, not just for creating our own future, but for demonstrating to other coastal communities what it means to be sort of state-of-the-art a community of resilience. So we look forward to doing that work together with you. I want to just make one other shout out. A couple of the panelists tonight were kind enough to acknowledge me in preparing for tonight's event. I want to call out my cohort, Carrie Schumann, Dr. Carrie Schumann, who's the Coastal Resilience Manager at SCCF. And I want to acknowledge the forethought of SCCF and the Captiva Community Panel to come together and create a role like that for us in this community. Carrie has had tremendous leadership in this effort and in other work that we really need in this community. So I want to really thank you. And thank you all for attending. We look forward to seeing you at the next event.
Yeah, thank you so much.